That's right. Mcdaniel insisting that his comments about blacks begging for scraps from the government were taken out of context.
Violence. That was a study from Berkeley. Berkeley's not exactly a conservative institution, but it did link hip-hop to violence. That's Berkeley, not me. And I was just cited that on the radio show. That's the first thing. Number two, our flag has been here an awfully long time. In 2001, 65% of Mississippians chose to keep that flag. Now, the thing about flags, like any symbol, is they are subject to different interpretations. But if 65% of the people have voted to keep that flag, we should respect their wishes. The flag can be offensive to some. I recognize that. But almost all symbols are offensive to someone. At some point, the majority has to control that decision. That's exactly what we did. So I'm going to stand with the majority in that instance. Now, if the people of Mississippi want to start another referendum and want to change it, that's the direct democracy concept they like to push sometimes. Okay, but I'm going to stand for that flag because the people have stood for it.
So how would you speak to that 38%? Those 38% of this state.
I'm going to ask them after 100 years, of relying on big government to save you, where are you today? After 100 years of begging for federal government scraps.
After 100 years of begging for federal government scraps. After 100 years of begging for federal government scraps.
After 100 years of begging for federal government scraps, where are you today?
Where are you today?
Where are you today? We've been dead last for 100 years. 100 years.
We've been dead last for 100 years.
I mean the state of Mississippi. I talked about the state of Mississippi. We've been dead last for 100 years.
That's right. Mcdaniel insisting that his comments about blacks begging for scraps from the government were taken out of context.
I was talking about the entire system, Ross. You're not listening to me.
Chris McDaniel defending himself after controversial comments about blacks on a national cable news show. The Republican state senator who's running for the U.S. Senate made the remarks Friday on MSNBC's Morning Joe show.
It's only fair if you watch the entire video. You can't take a sentence out of context.
A panelist on the show asked McDaniel what he would say to black Mississippians. McDaniel said he would ask, after 100 years of begging for federal government scraps, where are you today? The audience booed. McDaniel then said, quote, I'm talking about the state of Mississippi.
If he intended to say what he said, then it's consistent with the old Southern strategy, whereby candidates would infuse race in order to mobilize a certain base. And in this case, it would be racial conservatives.
I was talking generally about the idea of creating jobs in the free market, not allowing government to create those jobs.
But you have been asked a specific question about blacks, though.
All I can tell you is to watch the entire video, and you'll see that in no way was that referencing just African Americans. Not a chance.
Jackson State political science professor Dr. DeAndre Ori believes McDaniel's remarks could help drive a wedge between black and white voters.
Ronald Reagan, once referenced welfare queens, and we know that that was to help mobilize white racial conservatives. And these particular comments tend to excite or incite racial resentful whites.
And tonight we reached out to McDaniel's opponents to hear what they had to say about his remarks. They didn't want to comment. For now, we're live at the state capitol. Ross Adams, 16 WAPT News.